Emma almost did not go out that night. She stood in her small Toronto apartment with her coat half on, staring at her reflection, feeling tired in a way sleep never fixed. The message from her friends kept glowing on her phone, telling her to come out, reminding her she had been saying no for weeks. Her life had slowly become work, home, silence, repeat. Since the breakup, nights felt longer, and even music sounded empty. She told herself this was not about fun, just about being around people again, about proving she was still part of the world. With a quiet sigh, she locked the door and stepped into the cold evening air, not knowing that this simple choice was already changing something inside her. The bar was louder than she expected, filled with warm lights, clinking glasses, and conversations overlapping like waves. Her friends waved her over, pulling her into their circle, teasing her gently for disappearing lately. Emma smiled, laughed when expected, nodded along, and slowly the tight feeling in her chest began to loosen. She ordered a drink, listened. 2 stories about work drama and weekend plans, and for a moment she felt normal again. Then, as she turned slightly to take in the room, her eyes caught someone standing near the bar. And the moment landed heavier than it should have. He was. Not loud or flashy, not trying to be noticed, but there was something calm about him, something grounded. He looked around as if he was observing more than participating, and when his eyes met Emma's, it felt accidental but sharp, like a quiet interruption. She looked away quickly, annoyed at herself for noticing, telling herself it meant nothing. Still, when she glanced back, he was there, not staring, but aware, as if he had felt it too. Emma's thoughts drifted despite her effort to stay present with her friends. She hadn't felt that pull in a long time, the strange mix of curiosity and caution. Her last relationship had ended slowly, painfully, leaving her careful with feelings, especially sudden ones. She reminded herself this night was about friendship, about reclaiming small joys, not about opening doors she had just finished closing. The music changed, people shifted around them, and time moved faster than she realized. She felt lighter than when she arrived, yet also restless, like something unfinished was waiting. Her friend nudged her, joking about how quiet she had become. And Emma laughed it off, but inside she felt distracted, caught between the comfort of the familiar and the tension of the unknown. The man near the bar spoke to the bartender, smiled briefly, and Emma noticed how his expression softened when he listened. It was such a small detail, yet it stayed with her. She wondered who he was, why he looked slightly out of place, and why that felt familiar. The night pressed on, and Emma told herself she would leave soon, that she had already done enough just by showing up. But when she stood to get another drink, their paths crossed by chance. They exchanged a polite smile, nothing more, but her heart beat faster than expected. It was not excitement exactly, more like recognition, as if the night was quietly asking her a question she wasn't ready to answer. She returned to her seat, trying to shake the feeling, but the energy had shifted. The bar no longer felt like just a place to pass time. It felt like a moment suspended, waiting. Emma didn't know his name, his story, or his intentions. Yet something about the way the night had unfolded made her aware that staying home would have been easier, but coming out had been necessary. As laughter rose and glasses clinked around, Emma sat there realizing that sometimes life does not announce change loudly. Sometimes it starts with hesitation, a glance across a crowded room, and a quiet sense that something unexpected has already begun. Daniel did not plan to speak to Emma, yet his feet carried him toward her before his mind could stop the choice. He had been standing near the bar for most of the night, watching people laugh and reconnect while feeling like a visitor in someone else's story. Moving to Toronto had sounded exciting months ago, but the reality was quieter than he expected, filled with long workdays and empty evenings. When he noticed Emma earlier, it was not just her appearance that caught him, but the way she seemed present and distant at the same time, smiling while carrying something heavier beneath the surface. As he stepped closer, he felt the familiar doubt rise, the fear of bothering someone who did not want to be bothered. But he pushed through it, knowing he would regret staying silent more. When he greeted her, his voice came out calm, honest, and free of rehearsed charm, and her response surprised him with warmth instead of polite distance. They spoke easily, as if the conversation had been waiting for them, moving quickly from simple questions to small truths about work, the city, and how nights could feel longer than days. Emma told him she worked in marketing and sometimes felt like she was always selling confidence even when she felt unsure. And Daniel shared that he was still learning how to call Toronto home, missing familiar streets in Seattle while trying not to live in the past. The music and noise around them blurred into the background as minutes passed unnoticed. And Daniel found himself paying attention to how Emma listened, how she nodded slowly, how her expressions shifted with genuine interest instead of habit. There was no sense of performance between them, no need to impress, only a steady rhythm of words and pauses that felt natural. Emma felt the same ease, surprised by how quickly she forgot her earlier hesitation, how comfortable it felt to speak without guarding every sentence. She laughed more freely, her shoulders relaxing as if she had set something down without realizing she was carrying it. Daniel mentioned a book he was reading about starting over, not in a dramatic way, just as a reflection of where he was in life. And Emma understood without needing explanation. When her friends gathered nearby, signaling that the night was nearing its end, Emma felt a sudden pull of disappointment that caught her off guard, as if the story had reached a chapter break too soon. Daniel noticed the shift in her posture, the way she glanced toward them, and he felt the same quiet reluctance. He did not want the moment to end with a rushed goodbye lost in noise and movement. Without pressure, he suggested stepping outside for a short walk just to finish the conversation where it could breathe. Emma hesitated for only a second before agreeing, surprising herself with how certain the choice felt. As they moved toward the door, she felt the weight of the moment settle in, not heavy but meaningful, like a decision that mattered more than it seemed. The cool air greeted them as they stepped outside, and the sounds of the bar softened behind the closed door. Daniel felt a sense of clarity he had not felt in weeks, and Emma felt aware of herself in a new way, present and open. They had not touched, had not made promises, yet the space between them felt charged with possibility. The night had shifted from casual to intentional, and both of them knew, without saying it, that this conversation had already crossed from ordinary into something that would stay with them long after the lights inside dimmed. The street felt calmer than the bar, wrapped in soft yellow lights and quiet movement. And Emma immediately noticed how different the night felt once they were outside together. Cars passed in the distance, the city breathing around them. But the noise no longer pressed in. Daniel walked beside her at an easy pace, close enough to feel present without crossing a line. And that balance made the moment feel safe. They spoke again, but now the words carried more weight, as if being outdoors had given them permission to be honest. Daniel shared how the move had been harder than expected, how leaving behind friends and a familiar life made him question his choices during long nights, and how he sometimes wondered if starting over was brave or just lonely. Emma listened carefully, recognizing the same questions she asked herself, and she admitted that her last relationship ended quietly, without shouting or blame. It's just two people realizing they had grown in different directions. She explained how that kind of ending lingered longer than anger, how it followed her into empty rooms and unfinished plans. Daniel understood, not by fixing or advising, but by accepting the truth of it. And that acceptance deepened the connection between them. They walked past clothes shops and glowing windows, their reflections moving beside them, and Emma felt a surprising calm. Like she was exactly where she was meant to be for the first time in a long while. The conversation moved quickly, flowing. Without effort, touching on dreams delayed, chances missed, and the quiet hope that life still held space for something better. Daniel admitted he had stopped expecting moments like this, believing meaningful connections came only after long effort, not random nights out. And Emma smiled at that, knowing she had nearly stayed home. When they reached the waterfront, they slowed, drawn by the open space and the soft movement of the water catching city lights. They stood side by side, looking out in silence, and the pause felt intentional, not awkward. The stillness allowed everything they had shared to settle, and Emma felt the weight of it in her chest, not heavy, but real. Daniel broke the silence by admitting the night felt unexpected, different from anything he had planned. And Emma agreed, acknowledging the quiet fear that came with moments that mattered. They both knew how fragile new beginnings could be, how easily hope could turn into disappointment, and that awareness made them careful. There was no rush, no sudden action, only a shared understanding that this moment deserved respect. Emma felt the closeness between them, the awareness of his presence beside her. And she realized attraction did not always need touch to be felt. It could exist in words, in listening, in the space two people chose to share. Daniel felt it too. The pull to stay, to protect the honesty they had created from becoming something careless. When they finally turned back toward the street, time felt altered, as if the walk had existed outside the usual flow of ours. At the corner where they would part, both hesitated, unwilling to let the night close without acknowledgement. Asked if he could see her again, his voice steady but hopeful, and Emma answered honestly, saying she would like that. Feeling both excitement and caution rise together, they exchanged a simple goodbye, respectful and warm, and as Emma walked away, she felt a sense of fullness mixed with uncertainty. The night had given her something she did not expect. Not a promise, not a clear future, but a reminder that her heart was still open, still capable of connection. As the distance grew between them, Emma carried the moment with her, knowing it had quietly changed the tone of her life. Leaving her with a question she would not rush to answer but could no longer ignore. Emma woke the next morning before her. Alarm, the soft gray light of the city slipping through the curtains. And for a moment she stayed still, letting the memory of the night return on its own. It arrived gently, not like a rush, but like a calm tide, bringing back Daniel's voice. The quiet walk, the feeling of being understood without explanation. She noticed how different this morning felt compared to others, how her chest was not tight with worry, how her thoughts were clear instead of heavy. She moved through her routine, making coffee, checking her phone, getting ready for work. The night stayed with her, not distracting but grounding, as if something inside her had shifted into place. When her phone buzzed, she paused, already knowing who it might be. And seeing Daniel's message made her smile without effort. His words were simple and kind, wishing her a good day and admitting the night had stayed with him too, and Emma felt warmth spread through her, not excitement alone, but recognition. She replied honestly, choosing sincerity over cleverness. And as the conversation ended, she felt content, not rushed to define anything. At work, she noticed small changes in herself, how she spoke with more ease, how she felt present in meetings. Instead of counting minutes, how the future felt open instead of uncertain. She did not daydream about outcomes or create stories that didn't exist yet. Instead, she allowed the moment to be what it was, a beginning without pressure. Throughout the day, she reflected on how close she had been to staying home, how easily this moment could have been missed. And that realization stayed with her as a quiet lesson about showing up for life even when it felt easier to hide. That evening, as the city lights came on again, Emma walked home with a steady confidence, feeling more like herself than she had in months. Daniel crossed her mind not as a solution to loneliness, but as a reminder that connection could still happen naturally, without forcing or fear. Days passed and their messages continued, thoughtful and light, building something slowly, based on shared understanding rather than urgency. When they finally met again, it felt like a continuation rather than a restart, and Emma noticed how comfortable she felt in his presence, how conversation flowed without effort, how silence no longer felt like something to escape. She realized that the unexpected part of that night was not romance alone, but the way it reopened a door she thought had closed. The door to possibility, to trust, to allowing herself to feel without guarding every emotion. Daniel felt it too. The quiet shift in his life, sense that moving to a new city had finally led him somewhere meaningful, not through grand plans, but through one honest choice to speak. Neither of them rushed the story, understanding that real connection needed patience, and that made it stronger. As weeks turned into something more familiar, Emma looked back on that first night with gratitude, not because it promised a perfect future, but because it reminded her that life could still surprise her in gentle, life-affirming ways. One night, out with friends had turned into something unexpected. Not because it changed everything at once, but because it changed how she stepped into each day, open, hopeful, and ready for whatever came next.